Autumn brought a chill to her old bones. She just sat there as the sky turned the colours of sunset. The medals she had brought out shined the brilliance of their home star. "You should get back inside, Captain," Nurse Jennifer told the century-old woman. "I'm all right." Captain Tartarus looked up and smiled. She was waiting for her grandson. Nurse Jennifer was used to this and left her there to wait for her grandson. Soon he arrived. His motorcycle could be heard from a mile away. He took off his helmet and strode up the walkway towards her. "Granny," Jed grinned. They sat there, as they had since he was a little boy, except this time, in silence. "Granny, there are no more news stories. I've told them all to you twice already. Some of them more than that," Captain Tartarus told her grandson. She laughed softly. He shrugged. "I don't mind. I have just one final mission. You know that. It could happen any day." Captain Tartarus signed to him. Jed loved it when she gestured her words, because everyone who cared about space knew how to airlock talk. International Sign Language was ubiquitous in space. "I should get going," he decided after a while. It really was getting cold out, and he worried she'd only go inside after he left. "Just one moment, young man," Captain Tartarus sighed. Jed had grown into an honorable man, a respectable officer, and deserved the truth. He needed to hear it from her. "You need to know the real story." "What do you mean?" Jed sat back down slowly. "The moon mystery wasn't really that hard to solve. It was just overlooked that the gas leak was causing the hallucinations of aliens. The missing time was all accounted for when we checked the security footage. We saw people breathing in gas pockets and falling over unconscious," Captain Tartarus explained. "Well, I kind of guessed that much. That it wasn't really aliens, I mean." Jed nodded appreciatively. Captain Tartarus stared at him, realizing he was going to be shocked by the rest. None of her stories were real. "Remember the Martian mutiny?" Captain Tartarus waited. He nodded. "It was just a riot. The injuries that people got were when part of the habitat was breached. That's where the casualties came from. The fist-fighting in the corridors was purely Hollywood. I never punched anyone, although I was hit with some thrown debris at one point. Only minor injuries." "Yes, but you still took down those escaped space prisoners in the orbital prison." Jed gently punched the air for effect. Captain Tartarus was shaking her head. "I gassed them. The images of me atop them and zip-tying them, they were all knocked out by gas. I pumped gas into their life support from outside." Captain Tartarus told him that his favorite fistfight never happened. "Okay, so you weren't really a fighter. You still swooped in and saved all those people when the space elevator was damaged," Jed pointed out with satisfaction. She was shaking her head. "I was there commanding the rescue drones from Heart of Starlight. There were 65 locations on the elevator, and the whole thing was compromised. I did land at Seliger Station on the elevator for about 5 minutes, while we took on the passengers of the trapped spaceship. I don't even remember that ship's name." "It was the universal language, Granny. You saved 123 people in those 5 minutes." Jed sounded quieter. "I just gave them a ride. Folks trapped on an elevator? Just a lot of folks on a really big elevator," Captain Tartarus restated. "What about the Havana asteroid rescue? You saved all their lives. They were in peril." Jed thought of another story where she had actually rescued people. "It was a false alarm. We responded to a false alarm. The rescue wasn't necessary," Captain Tartarus sighed. This was going to be a very long evening. Jed was starting to catch on very slowly. "So you weren't a sleuth or an action hero. You still got into some romance, though. The William Tell affair?" "It is true that William Tell and I were in love. It ended in tragedy. I mean, it was doomed from the start. A woman in software can never share a kiss, you see," Captain Tartarus explained carefully. "He broke it off, you know." You had an affair with the smartest computer ever built, Jed argued. It was more of a fling, and barely that. I never even went digital with him, Captain Tartarus shrugged. He wrote a poem about you. Jed wouldn't let go. This worried Captain Tartarus, for there was far worse to come. He quoted some lyrics. I was young. It was silly, Captain Tartarus concluded. Jed sat and thought before he ventured. You delivered the Neptunian cure? Jed snapped his fingers. Yes, I delivered it. Not by hand. I didn't make it. Piloted the heart of Starlight or personally handed it off to the doctors. Sure, I delivered it. Why not? Captain Tartarus agreed, somewhat. And the anti-tech attack? You were there and did what? Jed probed, while suddenly reluctant to repeat any of her stories as he knew them. Mostly crowd control. At one point I spoke to the news. Captain Tartarus waited, while he forgot the rest of the story from his impression of her. I am wondering if the miracle of the nanobots was as miraculous as the movie they made about it. Jed shook his head. It wasn't. They were replicating trajectories of chemical spill cleanups without synchronized connectivity or issued authorization. The psychedelic images were just a malfunction. A virus. Captain Tartarus desanctified the miracle. You were still the captain of an advanced spaceship, Heart of Starlight, Jed pointed out. And before me there was Captain Asterius, and now there's Captain Cometstorm. There's always a hero captain commanding a fast spaceship, Captain Tartarus added. So, what about all your other adventures? Jed's voice quivered. He sounded like he might cry. They were all adventures, just not as exciting or heroic as they sound when I told them to you, or how they get told in the movies and comics. Captain Tartarus sounded glad he was hearing it. But why? Why are all of your adventures so thrilling? You just told me none of it was true. Why the stories? Jed broke down and asked for an explanation. Captain Tartarus had to think for a moment. He was right. What was the point? I was always scared. Every mission. I never knew what would happen. All the training and the high-tech equipment. Really, it just sits there frozen in place. It's about the woman in that spaceship, or the man, and the moment when you overcome that fear and say the command. That's something that the stories get right, Captain Tartarus ventured. What do you mean? Jed wondered. Because the stories convey what the experience was like, what it felt like to overcome that fear. Even with all the training and preparation, it is still scary out there. Space is very hostile. Everything can go wrong and kill you at any moment. That feeling of danger, it makes everything 10 times more intense and real. The stakes are that much higher. That feeling is in the stories. That's real, Captain Tartarus said, as she saw one tear run across her grandson's cheek. I see. Jed sat there very quietly. I am sorry to disappoint you. You needed to hear the truth of all of it, from me. Captain Tartarus apologized. I'm not disappointed. I always got that the stories were stretched. You never said it was scary, that you had to make yourself move and give commands, that you had to fight down the fear and make those decisions. It always seemed like you just knew what to do and did it. Jed was crying a little bit. I'm very tired now, Captain Tartarus confessed. She had seen her caretaker coming to check on her and nodded to her. Nurse Jennifer wheeled her inside. Good night. Jed waved goodbye to her and said, Good night, Granny.